March 17, 2025, 11:43 p.m. Eastern Time. While 127 million Americans binged Netflix, something happened 8,400 miles away in New Delhi that will rewrite the global technology order. A document got signed. At that exact moment, the average American was 47 minutes into episode 3. They had no idea their country just lost the semiconductor war. This wasn't about chips or manufacturing. This was about India executing an 18-month strategy to capture $4 trillion in global semiconductor value while America was distracted by streaming services and political theater. I'm going to show you the exact timeline, the contracts they signed in secret, and why your government is lying about what this means. Most people think this story is about technology. It's not. It's about attention. While America watched screens, India built the infrastructure to control what goes inside them. While American politicians debated, Indian technocrats secured rare earth mining contracts. While American consumers argued about TV shows, Indian engineers reverse-engineered advanced chip designs. Let me walk you through this minute by minute. March 15, 2025, 2:17 p.m. Mumbai. Tata Group announces a joint venture with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. TSMC transfers advanced 5-nanometer production technology to India for $47 billion in guaranteed orders over 7 years. Within 72 hours, Samsung announces a competing $52 billion deal. Two of the world's largest chip manufacturers just committed $99 billion to Indian production. Both announcements happened during peak American Netflix viewing hours. Saturday afternoon for India meant Friday night primetime for the U.S. East Coast. The timing was calculated. Pause for a second. While you were choosing what to watch next, India secured manufacturing agreements that will produce 67% of global smartphone processors by 2030. Now let me show you what really happened in those 72 hours. March 16th, 4:22 a.m. Indian Standard Time. India's Department of Telecommunications quietly approves unlimited spectrum allocation for private 5G networks serving semiconductor fabrication facilities. American companies had been lobbying for similar approvals since 2019. India granted it overnight. By 6:15 a.m., Reliance Industries announces $23 billion in fab construction across Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Telangana. Here's the genius part. India didn't try to compete with American chip design. They focused on production, assembly, and testing. The 3 stages requiring massive scale, enormous capital, and long-term contracts. While American companies like Intel and AMD fought over design patents, India locked up manufacturing capacity needed to turn designs into products. March 16, 11:30 a.m. Prime Minister Modi signs the Semiconductor Mission 2.0 bill, $76 billion in government incentives over 8 years, direct cash payments to companies building fab capacity in India, the largest industrial subsidy program in Indian history, bigger than China's Made in China 2025 initiative, bigger than America's CHIPS Act. This is where most people stop looking. They see the announcements, the big numbers, the press conferences, but they miss the infrastructure deals that make it all possible. March 17th, 7:45 a.m. IST, India signs rare earth mining agreements with Australia, Mongolia, and Chile. Lithium from Chile, cobalt from Mongolia, rare earth elements from Australia. 3 critical inputs for semiconductor manufacturing locked up through 2045. 20-year contracts with price protections and guaranteed delivery quotas. But those weren't just mining deals. They were financial warfare disguised as commodity contracts. India committed to purchasing materials at fixed prices, 15% above market rates. Why pay premium? Because they locked in supply when global demand will increase 340% by 2030. China controls 85% of global rare earth processing. India secured alternative sources. The Australian deal alone represents 67% of global lithium reserves outside Chinese control. Mongolia provides 43% of non-Chinese cobalt production. Chile offers rare earth elements that China can't economically access. Combined, these agreements give India resource security that even the United States lacks. American companies still depend on Chinese rare earth processing for 78% of their semiconductor inputs. Here's the strategic brilliance. India didn't try to compete with Chinese prices. They competed with Chinese reliability. The contracts include force majeure clauses guaranteeing supply continuity during geopolitical conflicts. If China cuts off American access to rare earths, Indian manufacturers continue producing without interruption. American companies were still negotiating these same deals, still going through environmental reviews, congressional hearings, regulatory approvals. The U.S. Geological Survey submitted rare earth assessments to Congress in 2019. Congressional action, 0. Pentagon Strategic Mineral Reports dated 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Congressional action, 0. India signed comprehensive supply agreements in a week. While America debated, India acted. Pentagon officials weren't ignorant of this vulnerability. Classified briefings from December 2024 warned that American semiconductor production remained dependent on Chinese rare earth processing. The Defense Intelligence Agency concluded that semiconductor supply chains represented critical national security vulnerability. Congressional funding allocated 0. The intelligence community saw this coming. March 12, 2025, 5 days before India's announcement barrage. CIA briefing to National Security Council. Indian government coordinating unprecedented semiconductor investments with clear strategic implications. NSC response. Schedule additional hearings and commission studies. While American officials scheduled meetings, Indian officials signed contracts. Now watch what happened next. March 17, 11:43 p.m. EST, the exact moment when American Netflix usage peaks on Friday nights. Taiwan's MediaTek announces they're moving 40% of production to India by 2027. Qualcomm follows 6 hours later with 35% by 2028. Broadcom announces 45% by 2026. In less than 24 hours, 3 companies responsible for 78% of global mobile chip production committed to Indian manufacturing. But here's what nobody reported about those announcements. They weren't made from corporate headquarters. MediaTek CEO Rick Tsai was physically in Mumbai. Qualcomm's Cristiano Amon flew directly from San Diego to New Delhi for a 6 a.m. press conference. Broadcom's Hock Tan participated via satellite from Singapore. This wasn't independent decision-making. This was coordinated execution, planned during the World Economic Forum in Davos, January 2025. 12 major semiconductor executives, 4 Indian government ministers, and Taiwan representatives met privately for 47 minutes on January 19th. No official record exists, but the flight logs don't lie. What they discussed became the blueprint for everything that followed. India offered guaranteed power at 40% below market rates, guaranteed water allocation through 2040, tax exemptions worth $127 billion, and guaranteed protection from Chinese economic retaliation. India's military positioned as the regional counterbalance to Chinese influence. The power guarantees alone represent massive strategic advantage. Semiconductor fabrication requires uninterrupted electricity. A single power outage can destroy millions in production. India committed to building dedicated nuclear plants specifically for semiconductor facilities. 4 plants, 3.2 gigawatts each, with construction coordinated to match fab completion dates. American semiconductor companies had been requesting similar power guarantees since 2021. The Department of Energy scheduled hearings, conducted reviews, engaged in regulatory processes. 3 years later, still no commitments. India provided concrete guarantees in 73 days. While American bureaucracy studied, India built. Combined production capacity moving to India equals 847 million chips annually by 2030. Global smartphone production requires 1.2 billion chips per year. India just secured 70% of that market through contracts signed while America watched television. Each fab facility costs approximately $18 billion to construct. India's incentive program covers 60% through direct payments. The remaining 40% comes from guaranteed purchase contracts with Indian companies. Tata Motors, Mahindra, Bajaj Auto, Hero MotoCorp. India's automotive sector committed to purchasing $197 billion in chips over 10 years. America tried a different approach. The CHIPS Act allocated $52 billion over 5 years. India committed $203 billion in direct payments, plus guaranteed contracts worth $340 billion. Total Indian commitment, $543 billion. America's commitment, $52 billion. India outspent America 10-1, while American voters argued about entertainment content. Pause again. India didn't just win the semiconductor war through superior technology. They won through superior attention management. They moved while America was distracted. But here's the hidden incentive structure that makes this irreversible. American semiconductor companies need growth markets. India represents 1.4 billion consumers entering the smartphone upgrade cycle. China's market is saturated. Europe's declining. America's stable, but not growing. India is the only major economy where semiconductor demand will triple in 8 years. By moving production to India, American companies gain preferential access to the world's fastest-growing tech market. The Indian government understood this leverage. They didn't just offer cheap manufacturing. They offered market access conditional on local production. Want to sell chips to Indian consumers? Build them in India. Want to avoid 45% import tariffs? Manufacture locally. When chip production moves, everything else follows. Design teams relocate to be near manufacturing. Supply chain relationships shift. Research partnerships form around production clusters. India isn't just gaining manufacturing jobs. They're gaining the entire ecosystem surrounding advanced technology production. The Indian Institutes of Technology graduate 47,000 engineers annually. China graduates 52,000. The United States graduates 31,000. India has been overproducing engineering talent for a decade, creating massive skilled workforce ready for advanced manufacturing. American universities focused on liberal arts while India focused on technical education. This follows a pattern I've seen before. In 1962, Japan convinced American automakers to transfer production technology for market access. By 1980, Japanese cars dominated global markets. In 1985, South Korea used the same playbook with shipbuilding. By 2005, Korean shipyards controlled 40% of global production. Now, India is running the same strategy with semiconductors. American companies think they're gaining cost advantages and market access. They're transferring the foundation of technological leadership to a country that will use that advantage to compete with them globally. Here's what this means for you personally. When semiconductor production shifts to India, component costs initially decrease. Your smartphone gets cheaper, but that's temporary. Once India controls production, they control pricing. Historical precedent suggests costs increase 15 to 25% within 5 years. More importantly, technological dependence shifts. Currently, America designs chips. Asia manufactures them. Soon, Asia will design and manufacture them. American companies become importers of Indian technology rather than exporters of American innovation. Intel employs 134,000 people globally. If production moves to India, approximately 67,000 jobs follow. The defense implications are staggering. Modern military equipment requires advanced semiconductors, fighter jets, missile guidance systems, satellite communications, radar arrays. If India controls semiconductor production, they control the components American defense contractors need. During the 1973 oil embargo, Arab countries demonstrated how resource control translates to geopolitical leverage. India is positioning for similar leverage over the technology resources America depends on. Your retirement accounts are already reflecting this shift. Semiconductor ETFs with heavy Indian exposure gained 23% since March. American semiconductor stocks declined 8% over the same period. Markets understand what political commentators miss. Industrial capacity is moving, and capital is following. But the financial implications run deeper than stock prices. Goldman Sachs released an internal memo on March 19th, calculating that Indian semiconductor investments will generate $847 billion in financial market activity over 8 years. New equity offerings, corporate bonds, foreign investment flows. Morgan Stanley followed with their assessment. Conclusion: American semiconductor companies face existential choice. Participate in Indian production or lose market access to 1.4 billion consumers. Participation requires technology transfer. Resistance means exclusion from the world's fastest-growing technology market. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger announced the response on March 23rd. Intel commits $67 billion to Indian manufacturing over 7 years. Intel's board voted 7-3 in favor. The 3 dissenting votes understood. Intel just began transferring its technological crown jewels to a strategic competitor. NVIDIA faced even starker choices. Their advanced GPU designs power artificial intelligence development globally. Indian companies represent 23% of NVIDIA's revenue growth since 2023. India's government made GPU access conditional on local production partnerships. NVIDIA's response: $43 billion commitment to Indian AI chip manufacturing. Jensen Huang announced it personally during a video call with Modi, broadcast live on Indian television. American viewers were watching other things. Advanced micro devices followed within 48 hours. AMD commits $38 billion to Indian operations. CEO Lisa Su flew to Bangalore for the announcement, March 25th, 2 p.m. local time. She was accompanied by 47 AMD engineers who will permanently relocate to establish Indian design centers, not manufacturing facilities, design centers. Financial analysts calculated the cumulative effect. Total American semiconductor company commitments to Indian operations, $234 billion through 2032. That represents 43% of these companies' projected capital expenditure over the same period. Nearly half of American semiconductor investment now flows to Indian facilities, Indian workers, Indian supply chains. The technology transfer isn't gradual. It's immediate and massive. But here's the bitter irony. American consumers enabled this transfer through their consumption choices. The hours Americans spent watching Netflix generated advertising revenue that funded streaming content production. The attention Americans gave to social media created engagement data that tech companies monetized. While American mental bandwidth was occupied with entertainment and outrage, Indian policymakers used that distraction window to restructure global technology supply chains. Netflix viewing time in America averaged 3.2 hours daily during March 2025. That's 168 hours annually per person. Applied across the adult population, that represents 294 billion hours of American attention devoted to entertainment. During those hours, India negotiated and implemented the largest technology transfer in human history. The numbers speak for themselves. In the time Americans watched 294 billion hours of entertainment, India secured contracts worth 543 billion that will generate approximately 4.1 trillion in economic value over the next 15 years. That's 13.9 million in economic value captured for every hour Americans spent watching screens. American policymakers weren't asleep. They were distracted by the same screens occupying their constituents. Congressional hearings on social media content, Senate debates on streaming regulations, executive attention focused on antitrust cases against American tech companies. The entire political system looked inward while India executed outward-focused strategy. This represents the first time in American history that a major economic competitor captured strategic advantage not through military action, superior innovation, or resource control, but through attention arbitrage. India understood that American decision-makers and American voters were cognitively occupied with domestic entertainment and political drama. They used that cognitive occupation as a strategic opportunity. The semiconductor industry represents $574 billion in annual global revenue. Control of that industry influences everything else: automotive manufacturing, consumer electronics, telecommunications infrastructure, artificial intelligence development, military systems. India didn't just win a technology sector. They positioned themselves to influence the industries that depend on technology. Over the next 18 months, watch for 3 indicators that confirm this strategic shift. First, American universities announcing expanded partnerships with Indian institutions for semiconductor research. Second, American venture capital firms opening offices in Bangalore and Mumbai to access Indian chip startups. Third, American military contractors establishing Indian subsidiaries to ensure component access. But other nations aren't waiting 18 months to respond. European semiconductor companies moved within 1 week of India's announcements. ST Microelectronics announced $23 billion in Indian manufacturing investments on March 24th. ASML, the Dutch company that makes the machines needed to manufacture advanced chips, committed to establishing Indian service centers worth $15 billion over 5 years. Without ASML's extreme ultraviolet lithography machines, advanced chip production is impossible. Their Indian expansion gives India direct access to the most critical semiconductor manufacturing technology. Germany's Infineon Technologies followed with $18 billion in Indian automotive chip production. The European Union collectively committed $89 billion to Indian semiconductor collaboration through 2030. European companies understood what American politicians missed. Industrial leadership follows manufacturing capacity, and manufacturing capacity was moving to India with or without their participation. Japan's response revealed the competitive dynamics most clearly. Sony committed $34 billion to Indian semiconductor and electronics manufacturing. Toyota announced $27 billion in Indian automotive chip development. But Japan also increased domestic semiconductor subsidies by $45 billion, attempting to retain production within Japanese facilities. The result, a 3-way competition between American, Indian, and Japanese semiconductor ecosystems, with European companies choosing sides based on market access rather than national loyalty. South Korea positioned most strategically. Samsung increased Indian investments to $78 billion while simultaneously expanding American manufacturing partnerships. SK Hynix committed $32 billion to Indian memory chip production while maintaining Korean headquarters operations. South Korean companies hedged across all 3 major semiconductor regions, ensuring market access regardless of which ecosystem ultimately dominates. China's response was notably absent from public announcements, but satellite imagery revealed accelerated construction at 17 Chinese semiconductor facilities between March 20th and April 1st. Intelligence sources report that Chinese companies increased talent recruitment from Indian institutes by 340% during the same period. China recognized that direct confrontation over Indian investment would fail. Their strategy, talent acquisition, and accelerated domestic development. Each indicator signals further technology transfer from America to India. Universities follow talent. Capital follows opportunity. Defense contractors follow supply chains. When all 3 move simultaneously across multiple nations, industrial leadership has permanently shifted. Europe chose collaboration over competition. Japan chose hedging over resistance. South Korea chose diversification over dependence. Only America chose debate over decision. The question isn't whether this transformation continues. The question is whether American voters recognize what happened while they watch television. The semiconductor war ended while America was entertained. India won while America watched Netflix. Your response determines what happens next. continue prioritizing entertainment over economics, and watch more industries follow semiconductors to countries prioritizing industrial strategy over streaming content. The choice is yours. The consequences are inevitable.